Hello, friends. I want to tell you a little story, but before I do, I just want to note with you this, that we will not be meeting for in-person worship on the charge on Christmas Eve, but we will be posting a Christmas Eve worship service online, and I encourage you to watch that, and my hope is that through this we may be able to stay connected over this Christmas day in some way. I encourage you to go to Facebook and look for a posting of worship for December 24th. And I want to also note with you that you may be not part of our congregation who know me personally, but my name is Dennis Zimmerman, and I am the pastor here at the Faith Ferndale United Methodist Church in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And I want you to know that even though we have not met, that I'm so glad you're here, and I hope that you find what I'm about to say. And if you participate by watching our worship services, I hope that you will know that you are welcome here virtually, and when the time comes, also in person. And now, friends, I want to tell you about a fellow named Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who I suspect you're pretty familiar with. He's a well-known American writer and poet. Did you know that in the year 1861 that Longfellow suffered a terrible tragedy in his family? His wife was heating sealing wax in order to seal lockets of their daughter's hair into envelopes, and somehow, it's not clear how, her dress caught fire, and she cried out, she screamed, and Longfellow, who was asleep in the next room, heard her cries, jumped out of bed, and found her engulfed in flame in the next room. He did all he could to put out that fire. The effect on him was severe burns on his arms, his hands, and his face as he worked hard to try to save his wife's life. But sadly, she had been burned so severely that she fell into a coma, and the very next day she died. Longfellow was devastated by this loss, and because of the severity of his own burns, he was not even able to attend his wife's funeral, his wife Fanny's funeral. And he fell into a season of sadness and loss that his family witnessed and attested to, that he would be quiet, silent for long periods of time, and he seemed to just be overwhelmed by this tragedy that had happened in their family. He did, however, during that time continue to practice his craft, his writing, and so the world really didn't know anything about Longfellow's suffering. Ultimately, over the course of a year or more, the sadness began to lose its power over him. He loved his wife and missed her terribly, but he was able to return to functioning normally. And there was a kind of a reason why he was able to do that. And that materialized in something he wrote a couple of years later. I just want to know, perhaps, friends, if you've had a season like Longfellow's in your life. Has there been a time when you felt so sad and lonely, or were experiencing such a deep loss, it wasn't clear how you were going to get past it? Maybe that's going on in your life right now. If it is, I want you to hear the second part of Longfellow's story, because in those years, the United States was involved in a terrible civil war. In the summer of 1863 had been the terrible, terrible carnage of the Battle of Gettysburg. And on Christmas Day of that year, Longfellow sat down to write a poem, and I bet it's a poem you're familiar with. It's "I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day." Listen to the first verse. "I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat of peace on earth, goodwill to men." And you may say to yourself, in light of the situation in our nation where brother was fighting brother and father fighting son and family divided against family, and the hate that was so prevalent in those days, how Longfellow can be talking about peace on earth and goodwill to men. And I think he understood exactly how folks felt about that, because in the third stanza he wrote, "And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth. goodwill to men. But then Longfellow reveals the thing that made it possible for him to journey on, to press on in his life after the loss of his beloved wife Fanny, and how he perceived that our nation could press on in light of all the devastation and hate that seemed so prevalent in those Civil War days. Listen to the last verse he wrote. Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead. God does not sleep. The wrong shall fail. The right prevail with peace on earth, goodwill to men. If you're struggling in this season with loss, with pain, with just a sense of devastation because of something that's been going on in your life, or you've had such a hard time this year with all that's happened that you just feel sad and overwhelmed, remember what saved Longfellow's spirit. Emmanuel, God is with us. God has not fallen asleep. The wrong will fail. The right prevail. And you will know God's peace and joy again. Friends, I wish you grace and peace and a Merry Christmas. So long, friends.